Good evening and happy Monday, everybody. We are back here at the regular time and should be for at least a few weeks before somebody else schedules something on a Monday evening for me. And yeah, it's clock week. I think we just need to start celebrating not just the very clock day yesterday of the change over to daylight savings time, but to make a whole octave of the solemnity of clock day just so that we can remind each other why we're all so tired and crabby for the first few days of the week there. But never mind that. I've got something else to get crabby about. So, in probably the past, I don't know, 9 months, maybe even a full year, I've taken to driving around town listening to the Minnesota Public Radio classical music station. Part of that is motivated by a genuine desire to be a little more cultured. And part of it is motivated by the fact that I just don't find the classic rock stations that I was listening to all that interesting anymore. And so I just decided, I think I'm going to try this the classical music. Sometimes I'm really listening to it and really enjoying it. Other times it's just kind of noise in the background, but it's something that I've been trying. However, we have to acknowledge the fact that these classical musical radio hosts are just kind of cut from a different cloth than I am. They just have a certain education and a certain outlook on things where I sometimes find them a little bit incomprehensible. And so I want you to imagine, a time before daylight savings time, that time being Saturday, and I'm driving around listening to the classical music and the radio host announces that we're doing all female composers today because it's National Women's Day. I was unaware that it was National Women's Day. I thought it was Saturday after Ash Wednesday and the commemoration of Saint John of God, which is a saint I've never paid all that much attention to, but he's got quite the striking name there. National Women's Day had snuck up on me. I was not expecting it to come up on me driving around listening to the classical music there. And then I started to wonder about what is it like for a woman composer today? Um, what is it like for that? Like, is composing a male dominated field? Um, is it the case that women composers are still having difficulty breaking in there? I'd be interested to see if somebody wants to look up the statistics, but I bet you in terms of, we'll say, contemporary music, I just mean the sort of music that's being written and performed specifically within the past 5 years, let's say. I bet you it's pretty egalitarian uh, to uh, to female composers. They're probably uh, if they've got any musical sense at all, they're probably just looking for quality compositions. I bet you it's a bit of a crowded field too. And so I found the whole thing, the whole signaling, right? That today we're doing only women composers. I found the whole thing bizarre because I couldn't understand why that was so important to the public radio station. Um, it doesn't seem like we need, let's say, a civil rights movement for the female composers of the world. It seems like they have a pretty equal seat at the table. they, I don't understand why this is important, and I'd be curious. Unfortunately, I don't have access to these people. I'd be curious to understand, just to listen to them explain why this is important. I wonder if they have ever articulated it for themselves, but it does just make me wonder what exactly what exactly are they up to? I can't see what they're up to there. That's just a bit of a odd, disconnected ramble there. Um, so I'm not. I can't see what they're up to. I can't see the telos towards which such actions would be oriented, and therefore I find it baffling and perhaps a touch suspicious there. Let's see what we got going on in the comments. Prefer National Huber State O'Clock Day. That must be the 4th of July. And, we do need to celebrate our country. So, yeah, I listen to the radio. It's free. It came with my car. Who even pays for that? If you want to get the your message before boomers, it's like it's probably the and me. Mark, it's an old technology. You come on, you hop on, we'll talk about it. And this is the possible miracle that I was talking about the last time we talked about. I listened to the radio. That's funny. I've heard of Mexican radio and Mohammed's radio. Mexican radio is a song by Wall of Voodoo. I do alternate between praying and listening to the radio. That does. I'm not a Carthusian monk, so I don't spend all of my time in. Let's see. The patriarchy is good conversation. Yes, it was. It was maybe a little disjointed, but I'm glad we're on the record saying that. So, well, Mark, could you figure out what those people on the radio were up to?
Virtue signaling.
I guess if you don't share the virtues, then the signal's kind of lost on you.
Well, yeah, I think that's what happens when you have a gap in, in something, and we have a gap of virtue, and so it gets filled with signals and not real virtue because we don't know what virtue is anymore for some
I mean, it's
reason.
certainly not like a struggle to decide that you're. Yeah, it's not like it's. I mean, frankly, that didn't hurt their bottom line at all. I'm gonna still listening. They don't even know that I'm listening. It's how radio works. So radio works
Right.
is they literally just throw it all out on the stream with advertising. But classical radio is kind of nice because it really doesn't have that much ads unless it's a pledge week and they're asking for money, which I can't complain about too much because that's exactly how Catholic radio operates. So,
I wonder where they got it from. Yeah, weird.
so yeah, but it's like they didn't have to sacrifice much. It's like I had the sense, right? Like you could imagine me, showing up to a grocery store, which would be very dangerous on Ash Wednesday, right? I got the ash on my forehead. And maybe somebody's just genuinely curious about it and like wants to know about it. And it's like the virtue, I am signaling something by wearing the ash on my forehead. Or let's say I'm really excited. Yeah, here's a better example, right? It's March 19th, and I've been invited to somebody's house to celebrate the feast of St. Joseph. Because, hey, Mark, you remember what St. Joseph did for us, right? He got us out of the woods. He kept his battery, he got the battery in my little phone alive.
He really did. Like, yeah. That was weird, man.
And so, it's like we have the celebration of the saint, and we're signaling, like, among other things, it's like a signal to the people in the church that this is somebody we should be attending to, somebody that should be important to us. So it was kind of like I got the feeling that I was watching somebody else's quasi liturgical celebration for something I didn't actually. So I'm just wondering if there's a connection between what signaling this is something that we should be valuing and virtue signaling, because they're pretty close and a bit unavoidable, I think.
No, I mean, virtue signaling happens because you're not enacting virtue. So the only thing you can do is signal what it is, right? Whereas if you're enacting virtue,
That's an action rather than just a
an
signal.
action,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. That's a bit of a little bit more Mark philosophy here.
Well, but this is the problem. Like, there's a huge difference between action and affectation. And there's like no overlap between thought and action. And people don't like that. But also,
But Aristotle said it.
it's
That's all we
easy
have
to
to
know
say.
this. Well, then Aristotle must have been right, because I mean, a lot of this stuff is just observable in the world, but we're so wrapped up trying to understand the world by fantasizing about it and then inferring the rules for ourselves that we just miss all the stuff in front of us that should tell you everything you need to know. But yeah, I don't know why people make this complicated. It's not complicated. It's not hard. It couldn't be hard. Everybody that
It's
lived
really easy,
before you did it.
right? It's really easy. You just ask people, "Hey, have you ever had a really good idea that you never followed up on?"
Right.
Like, that's all the argument you need, right?
You mean
I've had wonderful ideas, perhaps world-changing ideas that I never
do you
followed up
mean
on.
all but 10 of them? Is that what you're referring to here? Yes. Yeah. It can't be that easy. Oh no, it's hard. We need a PhD in a made up discipline to tell us how this works. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just trying to make sure I've got, like, a clear, a clear distinction between merely virtue signaling and let's say a feast day of a saint there, and we're really looking at the action that goes behind it.
Right.
So like the action of just getting together and celebrating something, or is it
Yeah. Well,
a
no, I
liturgy?
mean, no, I think the confusion is that signaling is not optional. So whether you do something or not, there's a signal. So signals are universal, actually, right? So virtue signaling is just that. You're reducing virtue to signal. Well, virtue is not a signal. I'm sorry. Like, so you can't do that. Like, that doesn't it doesn't function in the world, right? It's not an action. Um, and that's the part. Like, people think that like signaling has to involve an action, and actually it doesn't.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
John.
depending on how you're defining action,
Hey,
but yeah.
Well, you
Hey,
right.
John.
sorry, I'd have my camera turned on, but I'm driving and I have thoughts.
All
And
right,
Okay.
it's
John.
thoughts that are half questions. Okay, so uh, yes, the classical people were definitely virtue signaling. What virtue signaling means? Yeah, okay, so here's a little predicament I have or have experienced. I'm in a group chat with a bunch of guys who are working out, and we post our workouts and like maybe a little selfie or something, and like maybe a little description of what it was. And my thought about that, and like what is the reason we plainly do it, is we're encouraging each other to work out, right? So, when I do it, I feel self conscious because I feel like, oh, I'm virtue signaling. I've done something that is valued and something that we collectively value, something that maybe we could call a virtue or something close to that. But like posting about it feels self congratulatory and it feels egotistical. And my
Mhm.
thought is, I try and make myself do it anyway because it's a signal to the other guys and it's a little reminder and it's a little push that will make it easier for them to go work out too. And
Yeah, it's
so there's that. But then at a level above that, we've started a Lent chat. And so what I've done a few times is I'll go and create a comp line or something, and then I'll post in the chat that I prayed it because this is something we're all trying to do more or less. But that feels even like there's a level above that I don't know if the logic still holds or not.
right, right. So it does depend on what platform that you're using it on, right? So there is like a way where this is, let's say, a small Discord server dedicated towards encouraging each other to work out, or at least having that as one of the activities. Then you're just participating in the stated goal of the Discord server. Very different than going on Instagram and like trying to impress people. So
Right.
on the other hand, it's not quite as wholesome as an in-person environment. So we could look at that. Um, and if yeah, so if it's being used with like a within a tight community, because it's like we can think of it this way. We've got, let's imagine a small town in North Dakota, let's say, because there's plenty of small towns there, and there's a group of tight knit Catholics. Let's say they're all women and they go to the same Bible study, and they want to make sure that everybody is at church on Sunday because that's what you do when you're Catholic. And so they might even just have a day when it's a little bit difficult for them. They don't want to get out of bed. The weather's nasty, but not impassable. And the thought that somebody would notice that they're not there is what turns the corner for them. That's actually a really useful, I'm not sure of the right word, but it's a useful thing, right? So sometimes when I'm in the confessional and somebody talks about having trouble getting to mass on Sunday, I'm like, hey, do you have like a friend that you know is like super Catholic and really into this? And like, you could just start going with them because then you'd know at least one person. And a lot of times they'll say yes. I have no idea if they ever follow up on it, but it sounds like a great idea to me. So.
Right. Like there's something about the nature of the relationship that I have with the people that changes the nature, it changes the meaning of like the same post.
Well, yeah, yes. Meaning is context plus content. And you can't judge things on content. It's not actually possible. Everybody says you can. That's the objective idea. You can't. There aren't objects in the world. That's not a thing. And people think things are things, but actually they're not. They're defined a video on this and navigating patterns, right? They're defined by their context. Like that's how it works. That's what
it's just really simple, right? You can't. There's some jokes that you can tell in one context, you can't tell in another. Exact same words, exact same delivery, but things I'll say to another priest that when I'm out, like with the people, I'm not going to go there.
Well, telos matters. And the problem with these sorts of banal examples is if you work out, you are signaling one way or the other that you work out because your body has changed. Okay, so that already happened. That's not, like I said, signals are an actual universal, and your attempt to give out none, it will fail in all cases. And that's the problem. Like your absence is also felt and is a signal. If you don't go to the the big event with all the relatives, they're gonna infer something. Did you signal that? Well, you did through the inaction, effectively, right? Of not being there. Like signals are going to happen. That's not the issue. The issue is what are you signaling and to what audience? And so you can't determine it by audience either. You can't say, oh, well, it's a private, small audience. So the fact that I, showed off my engagement ring doesn't mean I was virtuous. Of course it does, right? Like, so it's just not something that can be determined by one factor, like every other thing, by the way, this is the problem. Everybody's reduced the world to one factor, and that's not the world we live in.
So I don't know. So the kind of virtue signaling I'm engaging in is very peer-to-peer. The kind of virtue signaling you were describing on the classical station is, we could say, superior to inferior, at least like in terms of where they're situated.
There was only one direction of communication, right? They're blasting the radio waves out, bearing a gift beyond price for almost free.
Well, they're telling you something that they're doing very specifically, and they're pointing it at something higher. Whereas working out is not a virtue, and literally nobody cares. But honoring Women's Day by highlighting women, that is a virtuous thing because it's a double abstraction. It's a second order abstraction. What you're doing is not a second order abstraction. It's not even an abstraction, right? You're just saying,
pulling your chain right now. It took me a second to recognize that.
But like it is. So like it's marginal. I don't like, I go work out. I don't want to post about it in the chat. It feels weird. What I really don't want to do is take a selfie because that feels vain and egotistical.
But it's not.
Right. And sort of like when I think, why am I doing this? I'm doing it for the guy who would have gone and worked, who like wasn't going to go work out tomorrow, but like maybe by nudge there, it pushes him over the edge to go take the action.
Right. But look, you're exemplifying your work in the world to people who need to see it. Like that's always what you should do anyway, forever. Like why is this hard? Don't make this hard.
I think part of the reason is that this is something that always would have been kind of local, right? So, and there is the technology that we're using to carry these signals is going to have an effect on it,
Right.
So, actually going through the process of, doesn't even have to be a selfie, right? You could like take a picture of the sweat stain on the bench,
Some guys do that, and that is a cooler way to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a cooler way. Yeah, that's the Jocko Willink way right there. And
you see a human-shaped sweat stain.
Yeah.
There was one guy who was doing like hundreds of burpees every morning, and he was just like, he would post the sweat stain on his planks of wood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so some of the stuff that used to happen face to face, it gets a little bit funnier when it's just kind of virtual, right? Just like this communication that we're having is fine, but it'd be way cooler if we were all sitting around a campfire right now.
Right.
Yeah. There's a sense in which it's local and that we all kind of know each other. And then there's a really profound sense in which this is not at all local.
Right. Well, and we're struggling with that because we've only recently almost sort of developed language for that. And then people get retarded and they start using terms like parasocial, which doesn't mean anything at all and has no utility in the world. Right. And then they get crazy. But the bottom line is that when you can send a signal to more people, it attenuates. Like it doesn't matter that it's digital. Like digital signals also attenuate. And there's reasons for that, and that they're wrapped up in modes of interpretation, roughly more than that, but also modes of interpretation. And so the attenuation of the signal makes it harder for things like feedback to work. It also makes it more difficult for you to relate to your audience. And when you can't relate to your audience clearly, for whatever reason, right? It could just be that, yeah, we've been all in person, but now we're not. That makes you nervous. As well it should, right? And that's where part of this is coming from. Also, you've misplaced humility, sir. But I just know that from years of interaction. That's not something that I determined on the fly, we'll say. So this is a problem in our society because we don't have good exemplars for good humility. The church has been in recession for decades, and so, if not hundreds of years, and so we don't know when to signal. And this is what bothers people about like Donald Trump is that he's like, no, I'm going to signal strength here and here, and I'm going to signal family here, and I'm going to signal defiance here, and all of this other stuff. And everyone's like freaking out because they're like, is this right? Is this wrong? I don't know. I'm used to these attenuated signals, and I haven't been used to anybody with any sort of, we'll say, control and influence actually just saying, no, I have control and influence or some combination thereof. And that scares the people that will say don't want that to be the case because they're weak and they don't have any. Also, yeah, I have no use for those people anyway. If they're not going to like find a place in the world, then yeah, they can exit it. That'll be fine.
We just had Ash Wednesday. So whenever this comes up on the internet, the evangelicals come around and they quote the bit of Jesus of when you fast and when you pray, don't do it in front like these guys over here in front of everybody, but go into your room and quietly and anoint your head with oil and do your normal bit and don't performatively fast. And the evangelicals take these words and they take it to mean that fasting and maybe prayer in some sense needs to be private and it needs to be individual.
Right.
Father, how would you interpret Jesus saying that, and how would you do that in a way that Like, is Jesus against corporate prayer? It seems pretty unlikely, but what did he mean by this?
Yeah, well, so sometimes, Jesus of Nazareth, our Lord, he can be a little bit difficult to understand because in one part of the Bible he says, anybody who's not with us is against us. And then in another part, it might even be in the exact same gospel, he says, well, anybody who's not against us is actually with us, right? So he will just say those two things right there, right? And I think he says these sorts of things in order to challenge us and to force us to go a little bit deeper there. Um, there is a certain, and he was responding obviously to things that he was seeing. There is a certain way of, there being a merely performative show of devotion that doesn't have any of the real substance underneath it. You see this a lot in Jesus's interactions with the Pharisees, and especially those Pharisees that he found to be most annoying. Um, like, okay, I'm preaching the good news to Matthew and his tax collector friends. Why is this annoying you? Like, these are the people who need to hear this the most, because people who are well don't need a physician, but the sick do, right? So we've got all these different tensions in there. So was Jesus, you know, was he just virtue signaling when he went and drove the money changers out of the temple with a whip? Right? So, like, he was obviously showing everybody, something there. We need to also
What about the cross, Father? I mean, talk about a virtue signal. I mean, really.
a little over the top, huh? And he engaged with corporate prayer, like we've got the whole high priestly prayer in John's gospel. He went and did all of the, Jewish ritual temples, and seemed to do this in memory of me, seemed to imply that there'd be such a thing as corporate prayer. So, it's a matter of wisdom to sort out when exactly we need this piece of wisdom for Jesus and when exactly we need this piece of wisdom for Jesus. The Bible does that, maybe not all over the place, but a bit more than you think. There's one part of Proverbs where it's like, hey, don't answer a fool according to his wisdom. But or no, don't answer a fool according to his folly. But also make sure you answer the fool according to his folly. So it's one of those things where simple,
Mhm.
flat interpretation is really not helpful.
Yeah, I think
All of that to
Ixnon's on
I
it.
say,
think
we have one day of Ash Wednesday and then 40 days of Lent where we don't have the dirt on our foreheads. So
Yeah.
I think that evangelicals in particular are more comfortable, of course, interpreting Proverbs and interpreting other elements of the scriptures as wisdom things that you need to like look at, you need to balance with other elements of scripture. I think that there is some hesitancy in interpreting Jesus that way. And there's an increased desire to, if Jesus said it, we're going to interpret it more flatly and more directly than maybe some other elements of scripture.
hey, well, I
Yeah.
think that's a bad idea, because we've got one parable where Jesus is like, okay, so the servants come in from the fields. Does his master put on an apron and wait at table at them? No, he tells them, go put on your apron, serve me at table, and then when you're done, you can eat something later. And the servants say, we are unprofitable servants. We only do what we have been told. So that's one parable from Jesus. The other parable from Jesus is like, oh, you guys were waiting for me in the third or fourth watch in the night. This is awesome. I, the master, am going to put on my apron and wait a table for you. Right. So it's like,
Hmm. Hmm.
why would you
Um,
try and just do like a direct one-to-one? Our Lord is just not like that.
Yeah, context plus content. And they miss that part because we're postmodern. So we throw out the context, we keep the content, we make AI. The whole trick of making AI work is providing it proper context, and then still no one gets it. They're still not cluing in yet, right? Like the context matters. And actually the purpose of doing something like that from, say, a cog-sci perspective would be to open up your brain to further perspectives and interpretations, and that fights fundamentalism, which is why evangelicals can't do apologetics, because their ass is handed to them by people with better logic and memory skills, like every single time. And it's just not that hard, right? But if they didn't rely on that and they understood interpretation correctly, especially with respect to context and content, then they wouldn't make that mistake, right? They'd make other dumb mistakes, but not that one.
And I just sometimes think there's just some good old fashioned anti-Catholic prejudice there, right? So, and I bump into this one every once in a while. We've got Jesus. He sometimes uses some pretty outrageous hyperbole, right? You Pharisees, you strain the gnat and swallow the camel, right? And then when Jesus says, "Call no man father," oh, okay, he literally meant that. Means you're never supposed to call anybody father ever. Kind of like, yeah, okay.
I think that there's a real desire among fundamentalists to have something to be flatly interpretable and flatly applicable,
or requirement, because they can't handle it.
Yeah, well, maybe so. You want a simple statement, a simple commandment, a simple law that you can set in front of yourself and you can just pour willpower into.
Right.
Like you want a commandment. You could push the plow, do the thing, don't do this thing. I don't want to have to interpret, or at least I want to interpret things down into that particular thing. Like we want our takeaways to be something we can.
That, right? So like, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Okay.
Exactly. That's like fundamentalists are here for that.
Yeah.
Right, but that's also the individualist perspective, right? The bottom line is, if that worked, you wouldn't need to be your brother's keeper, because everybody just have a copy of the book and problem solved. Obviously,
this is yeah. But this is the. I was thinking recently of there's some kind of connection between this interpretive frame of scripture, of sola scriptura, of I'm sitting with my Bible under the tree. It's perspicuous. It's obvious. We're going to go roll it out and do it. And there's a connection to that. These kinds of people, the fundamentalist evangelicals, are also very constitutionalist in the sense of authorial intent. There's a connection of we have the Bible that tells us what to do in life, and there's a certain hermeneutic we apply to that. And there's the Constitution, which applies to how we do the state. And they're the same kinds of documents that need to be interpreted in the same way, according to authorial intent, but according to like a very linear, flat, we're rolling this out. And when I would hear evangelicals talk about getting back to the Constitution, I associate it in the way that they were talking about it the same way of getting back to the Bible.
Yep. It is, because they want a book to tell them what to do. But they want it. Like, they don't want to do it with other people, right? And which is contrary to all previous tradition, where that just didn't happen. Like, you just reported to the guy above you, whatever that was in that arena, we'll say, right? And then those words were not even read by you ever, because you were illiterate, and that was great, because you could free up your brain to be useful instead of reading books all day and having stupid internet conversations and wasting time.
People found different ways to waste time. They didn't need StreamYard for it.
That's true. No, that's always true. I'm just saying the internet makes everything worse, because it does. So
makes everything more, at least more quicker, more faster, more data, more time, bigger, faster, better, stronger. Something like that. Yeah.
Worser.
So like this idea of virtue signaling. I'm stuck there again. We're still the accusation of virtue signaling. It seems like it's leveraged in cases and in places to where the virtue is disagreed with, but then the accusation is claiming that it's the signal that's the problem, but like the accuser probably really disagrees with the virtue too. And so, like the evangelicals' accusation of virtue signaling against like Catholics and others for doing Ash Wednesday, it's because they, on some level, they disagree with the project or maybe disagree with the virtue. When people accuse liberals of virtue signaling, like there's the virtue or there's the signaling elements that people don't like, but like the person accusing the liberal really doesn't agree with the virtue, and that's why they're making the objection. It's like
No, not necessarily.
it's not the
I mean,
real accusation.
it's just a bunch of people noticing a bunch of flat world behavior and giving it a valid label. But it doesn't manifest in one way with any group. Like lots of people call lots of things virtue signaling, and they're all virtue signaling. They're just virtue signaling in different ways and under different conditions because it's context plus content, right? And it's funny too because none of them believe it. Like none of them believe the humility lies in not bragging on your accomplishments. That didn't happen because lots of people don't brag on their accomplishments and they get no points. So
yeah, and so like what was happening on, like I didn't hear the classical thing. Probably the kind of thing that was happening there is that so the logic, the subconscious, not articulated logic probably goes something along the lines of all humans are equal, men and women are equal. We see that men have done most of the historical things in history. And so to embody the value and virtue of equality, we're going to elevate, honor, and virtue signal about the accomplishments of women as a way of embodying and encouraging others to embody that virtue of equality.
Too hard.
Like there's probably
Mimicry. It's
the
just
people on the classical station.
No, it's just mimicry. So I pointed a day and I go, it's International Dragon Day. And then everybody goes from different perspectives because you can go, well, I'm a business. I want to sell stuff. How do I leverage International Dragon Day? I know, right? And the business will implement something, right? Because
Dragon-themed merchandise.
Right. They would do Dragon Day merchandise, or they would do Dragon Day sales, come in and use the word dragon and get 10% off at checkout, whatever it is, right? They get a handle for free. The person who thought up International Dragon Day, which was me, by the way, so don't be thinking anybody else did it, stole it from me. That person had no thought in their head about what other people would use this for, right? Or to the extent that they didn't see all the possible uses because you're dumb. You can't. It's just that simple. Sorry. Don't care about your IQ.
Adding St. Patrick to the Roman calendar doesn't have anything to do with dyeing the river in Boston green.
No, that's where you're wrong, Father. That's where
I think it does have something to do with that.
The green Boston River was ordained, okay? It was ordained.
It's predestined.
Predestined. So what happens is you've pointed at Dragon Day, and then you come up, you're a radio station, and you look on the calendar, and it's Dragon Day, and because if you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent. It really doesn't matter. You got to have something to break up the calendar. Okay, what are we going to do to celebrate Dragon Day? Well, there's this opera piece and there's this piece of classical music and they allude to dragons and maybe there's an Asian composer out there somewhere that has a dragon song. I'm almost sure there's a couple of those, right? And so we should highlight them. Of course you should. It's very people do very simple logic. These complex logic chains, no one does that. No one. Like actually 0 people. Right? It's very simple. Our rationalizations tend to be about an order of magnitude more complex than the way people actually think. Dragon Day is January 16th? No, it could not have passed without International Dragon Day. International Dragon Day. It's mine. It's my idea. They stole that from me, X-Men. They had no right. I will sue them. But that's the problem is we often, especially in the conspiratorial skeptical mindset, where we want a rational world because we're all fundamentalists all of a sudden, except me who wants to burn all the books. See a connection? We want these rationalistic explanations, and it's like, no, people are dumb. And if you just follow simple patterns, you'll figure out in 4 seconds what they're doing and why. And it's no more complicated than that. Now you may talk to them, and they may spin you a story, several volumes of story about why they did what they did, as they scramble to justify a behavior they don't understand. But most people don't know what they're up to, as Dr. Peterson says. And that's why everyone's confused. We want these complicated, conspiratorial, ultra rationalistic definitions to explain our mechanical world, and we don't. It isn't there. Like, that's not real.
Yeah, and so the flip side of this would also be, we'll say folk festivals arising from saints' feast days, right? So we could think of, as much as I hate to say it, St. Patrick's Day, and I am rather annoyed that so many people in the world just take it as an opportunity for drunkenness and fornication. When St. Patrick was like, I'm going to go stay up on that mountain for all of Lent, don't bother me. And, fasts 40 days and 40 nights on Crow Patrick, right? He would just be, if he wasn't encountering the beatific vision and like the unveiled act of beholding God right now, he'd be super ticked off about it. But he's beyond that now. But we could see that as like, okay, St. Patrick. Yeah, we're a big fan of St. Patrick. We're a big fan of Father Patrick down the street, who's named after St. Patrick. And since he is the patron of Ireland, we're just going to get together and we're going to have a few pints. But instead of just doing it like we do every night, we're going to do it in honor of St. Patrick. So,
my understanding of how it's celebrated is it's kind of an intra-Lent break. Like there have been no pints, but then on St. Patrick's Day, we're taking a break from Lent and doing pints. And so to me, like maybe there's a pent up desire, and there's like maybe a natural, okay, things are going further out of hand than they otherwise would have.
yeah, no. I mean, the secular celebration of St. Patrick is what bothers me. That would be the case in Ireland, where it's a solemnity on their calendar, so they can celebrate it with greater festivity. But it's a commemoration on our calendar, which is of a lower rank. So you got to get to the rank of solemnity before you're excused from penance on penance days. So,
okay.
Yeah, no. Different saints can have different ranks in different, we'll say, nations or regions, which is just a good thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for it.
The Catholics are very flexible, contrary to the Protestants' ridiculous, uninformed, half-wit beliefs. I mean, in general, but also about them. But yeah.
Yeah. So I'd be interested to see how St. Patrick's Day is celebrated in Ireland. But yeah, the folk festivals will like just come out of what the church is doing. Just because, like, oh, we're having a festival today. Well, these berries are in season at this time of year pretty consistently. So we're going to have a pastry made out of these berries, and it'll be, crossberries, because it's on September 14th, the triumph of the cross, right? Cross buns, hot cross buns. That might be where they come from.
Could be.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way the world always worked, and we've lost that because secularity, which is just some Gnostic idea that can't work.
And the thing is that the duty for setting the calendar has now fallen upon the local school board.
Right.
Like like Mark said it best, we got to break the calendar up, right? You can't have every day be the same. You'll go nuts. You'll go nuts to that. There is no saint inscribed for today on the current Roman calendar. The old Roman calendar might have one. I'm not sure. We don't, but the Roman martyrology would have, all of the saints, and every saint gets their own day. But the universal calendar doesn't fill every day. So, and most saints' days pass without too much fanfare. Yeah. So anyway, I would like our duties back. I would like to be the one setting the calendar now, and I think the school board, for all of its virtues, does not have the spiritual capacity to guide the nation.
Recession of the church.
Well, I mean, obviously the thing to do is to take over the school board. Like this
No,
isn't that hard.
no,
But,
no
Obviously,
reason.
the
Father Eric,
thing to do
you
is
get
to build more Catholic schools.
well, I
That you
like
could
get it.
do.
You have a parish, you get some guys, you run them on the school board, and then you ask them, hey, I want
No,
these days and those days, and you reset the
no,
calendar that way.
no. Render unto Caesar. Like that's not a problem. It's just if the church stops receding and actually starts reasserting and saying, no, these are the holidays and these are the workaday days, and that's the way it is, then everybody will follow suit. Because again, the person who takes the action usually wins the fight every time.
Right. Well, that entails Father Eric going to the school board and explaining how
No, he
it's going to
doesn't
be
have.
on some
No, he
level.
doesn't. The church just has to put out a statement saying these are the days off, these are the days not off, and this is what we're doing. And the school board will sit stuck in committee arguing about that until it finally gives up and says, "Well, can we just point at something else?" And then it'll point at what the church has, because that's how these things work. They work that way in corporations. They work that way in tiny companies. They work that way in Fortune 500 companies. It just works that way. I've seen it. Like that is how it works. I use this all the time in my consulting. I would come in with a written plan. Somebody would go, well, I don't like that plan. It's got these flaws. And I go, all right, I'll tell you what. You bring in your plan tomorrow and we'll vote on it. No one ever bought a plan. Ever, not once. Not once, ever. Ever, ever, ever. In 35 years. 0 people. So we never even had the argument. I never even had to take it to a Democratic vote. I just told them I'd give them democracy. And of course, I never had to. And so they never got it. And that's their own damn fault. And they can't blame me. Problem solved.
People don't really want democracy.
No, of course not.
Yeah, I'm not proposing democracy.
No, but that's the thing. You don't have to take over Caesar. You can just lead Caesar because that's what the church is supposed to do. That's what the church has always done. I don't know why the church isn't doing that anymore. Father Eric, get on it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I'll start tomorrow.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well, I mean that. Yeah, the leading business. That's the right way to think about it. That was actually, who was it? Pope. I think it was Pope Galasius. Was like, when Christ said that they had 2 swords, that was an image for the authority of the civil powers and the authority of the church. And these 2 should be distinct. And that was like 7th century. And then everybody just said, yep, that's correct. And in theory, that's how things were supposed to work in Christendom. Oftentimes, people got greedy, both church and state.
Yep.
So, it happened. But boy, it's a nice theory.
It's almost like it doesn't matter how good your theory is. It's almost as if I'm not proposing this. It's almost as if we live in an imperfect world and we're imperfect people, or something like that. I mean,
oh gosh,
I don't want to make a claim here. I don't want to scare anybody.
Oh, dear.
Man, that would require so much work if we were imperfect, right? Because we'd have to like attend to our own flaws and be humble and such.
Oh, it sounds awful. I can't even. Oh.
Anyway, let's just not bother with it. Let's just pretend that we're right about everything. What could possibly go wrong?
And we'll talk about it. We'll virtue signal it to the world. This is how the world should work. Ah.
Oh man, well boy, I feel like we've about solved it. I just have to go out and do things in the world, and then hopefully it'll be better.
No, I thought we settled on more conversation. We'll just keep talking about all our wonderful ideas.
Yeah, that was, I think I saw somebody on your server talk about the machine stops.
Yeah.
That was the most curious part of it that I remember. It's a short story from like 1907 where everybody's living inside this giant machine that takes care of everything for them. And then there's a few people who know how to fix the machine, although I don't think they know how it works, so that's a problem. But like when people are communicating with each other, because they still have community and that sort of thing, they're always like, oh, I had some very interesting thoughts today and I wanted to share that with you. and like that was like prized above all else. So yeah, I just remember thinking, "Dad got it all!" Like that. How was this written in 1907 or whatever? Like,
Yeah, it's the internet. It's just the it's really fun. It's the video game reality that Sally's so enamored with lately.
Sandy, hello, Sandy. I'm always curious about other people's religions. It's a fascinating thing to me. That's what's kind of going on here. Is there are a group of people who earnestly celebrate International Women's Day, and I don't understand it. It's like I don't have any, like, if I want to, I celebrate like what we've got going through the year. We'd have January 1st, the Feast of Mary, Mother of God. We'd have March 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation. February 2nd, the Feast of the Presentation. Um, we've got like Our Lady of Lourdes. We've got the Assumption of Mary. We've got the Birthday of Mary. We've got the Immaculate Conception of Mary. We've got the Presentation of Mary in the temple. So because I spend so much time celebrating our mother, I don't feel any need to celebrate International Women's Day. It just seems a little bit superfluous there. Uh, yeah, it's something else. Something else. The International Women's Day is just one of the feasts on the calendar. It's not the main attraction. But because they don't have equivalent of Easter, we have a hard time figuring out what I have a hard time figuring out. Mark's got it all figured out. I have a hard time figuring out what it is that yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's just what I think.
it is just highlighting a religious pattern that is pretending to be secular or something. And it's like, yeah, that's you're just doing something religious. It's just we're trying to figure out what is your religion and what is the result. The result is a bunch of virtue signaling, right? It's not a real engagement. It's not a real participation with others. It's just a signal to the world that this is important, when in fact it's not integrated into the world. And then it's a shame. There's no real compelling reason for that.
Sound and fury signifying nothing.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, somebody should write that down.
They should.
Uh-oh. Here we have the man from tomorrow. Here comes Jim.
How are you all? Just listening to all of his, it's very interesting, very entertaining.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work, but listening, I can't do two things at once. Listening to you and, but anyway, it was interesting. Just one little comment about the imposition. I think the old calendar, each day had its own saint, but now I don't know, probably all through in America. If you listen to radio, you know, those things in the car, people have, you know, not only Women's Day, which is a Marxist thing. And I won't go. You all know the history, but we got, you know, Dog's Day. Then all sorts of virtue signaling. Instead of Saints' Day, they've sort of imposed a secular, non-binary type of instead of you know, that's another small detraction from Christianity, in particular Catholicism. And I don't know whether you know, you probably heard now Ash Wednesday and the Mardi Gras, the most famous Mardi Gras in the world is Rio, Brazil, Catholic country.
Yeah.
But it's been perverted to such an extent. You know, the second biggest homo place is San Francisco. Unfortunately, Sydney, Australia, where I am, is the third most popular in the world. And the debauchery, I mean, anyway, I won't go there, but it's again, as I said, maybe I'm, you know, conservative, old, fashioned type of person is just the mockery of Christianity. But who am I to criticize it?
Yeah.
Right,
I don't
right.
even think it's deliberate. Like when you take away the saints
Hmm.
because you imagine secularity, something's gonna fill that gap.
Vacuum, yeah,
Yeah, for
So
sure.
rather than
absolutely.
like having a blessing of dogs on the feast of Saint Dominic, it'd be very, very fitting thing to do because the Dominicans were nicknamed God's dogs because Dominicani
No,
means the dogs of God.
Carney, Carney,
Yeah,
Carney, Latin,
the
yeah.
dogs of God in probably Latin and maybe even Italian. I'm not sure how close they would be in Italian, right? So it'd be like, okay, we're just going to do a blessing of dogs on the feast of Saint Dominic, and that's the connection. And so the people who, let's say, feel strongly attached to their dogs or would like to celebrate how good of a hunting dog they have, they have an opportunity for have the priest come sprinkle a little bit of holy water on them. That's the thing about these different days, right? Is that there aren't really any custodians of them. You don't have anybody, so like at a parish, we might do the blessing of pets on October 4th, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi,
See, that's right.
because of his connection and in singing praise to all of creation. But like it's the priests who are expected to be the ones to remember these things, right? Like, oh, okay, we want to do a blessing of pets. October 4th is the day for it, and hopefully the weather's nice because North Dakota, who knows? By the time you get past August, anything can happen. So yeah, we've got like these rampant religious patterns being acted out throughout the world without anybody being responsible for them and saying it's a little too far.
Right, but
If you want to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, that's fine. You drove the snakes out of Ireland. We're all a big fan of that. But like, just keep it to a few beers, all right? Like, no need to get too crazy here.
But that's the fundamental difference. When you point at a saint, you're pointing at a virtue or set of virtues. And when you point at international women, you're not pointing at anything virtuous, right? Because women internationally don't encompass any kind of virtue. Like they don't embody it. First of all, it's not an embodiment. That's a big difference, right? And second of all, it's not an identification of any one or 3 or 10 particular things.
Old civic holidays were better about this, right? So,
Right.
like the 4th of July, this was when we signed the Declaration of Independence, right? And you could at least point at, like, all right, we've got the people who put their signature down on this, and they could have been hanged for treason for that. So, we got something that we're pointing at there. Like President's Day, you'd have like Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday. Those were, it's like we're holding up these presidents as models to be followed and people we should be grateful to for the service that they rendered to our country, right? And then we get to like the 20th century, we get some more abstract content, right? So Memorial Day. So that's still pretty solid, right? Like I got a pretty good grasp of Memorial Day. It's great if you're Catholic because you just go to church in the morning and you pray for all the soldiers who died in the line of active duty, right? And then we got Memorial Day right there, Veterans Day. And then Labor Day has always just been like, just very confusing to me. Like,
Because it's a Marxist virtue, roughly speaking. It's not a
whereas
real
when
thing.
Catholics want to do it, we have the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker. So, like,
Right.
we're yeah.
It's embodied, right? And it points to virtue, right?
Mhm. So
I think
it's
Labor Day, I always experienced Labor Day as sort of a secret Father's Day. It's like it's Father's Day. It's all about grilling and it's all about cargo shorts and it's all about flip flops because Dad's the one who really puts in the work, and so we do Dad stuff on Labor Day.
I won't argue with that. We'll keep that interpretation. It's fine by me. But I don't think that's what the founders of Labor Day had in mind.
The evil Marxist union scumbags. I'm sorry. Is that what I heard? You weren't coming
I
through
mean,
fine.
I'm not going to argue with you on that point.
Thank
But those are your words and not mine.
Fair. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to
Oh,
make sure
man.
you don't have to get in trouble, and so that I will. That's fine.
Everybody loves Arbor Day.
Arbor Day.
I
Who
like
doesn't love
Honoring
trees.
trees. Yeah,
Trees are a virtue. Sure, why not?
they're also embodied.
Well,
Or embarked anyway, something like that.
well, basically, you can say it's modern day pantheism. Talk about trees and it's a
Earth
religion in
Day.
itself.
Earth Day's
Yeah,
getting
Earth Day,
pretty daggone
exactly.
close to just being straightforwardly pantheism right there.
Yeah.
Why is Gaia worship Oh, never mind. I figured it out.
Do Catholics reject pantheism completely, or?
Yep.
Of course.
Yep.
Well, in Judaism, the idea is like panentheism, which is the idea that God is transcendent and immanent.
No difference.
Yeah. So, the Catholic theology, in its commonly stated form in catechesis, would say that God is both profoundly and infinitely transcendent above his creation, but also present to and intimately tied in with his creation. And if you want to know how that works, you'll have to ask him, because I don't know. He's got his ways are well above mine. So yeah, this panentheism was like a word that I learned 3 years ago, and it seems like a bit of a new word. And like, I'm okay with saying that the being of God is in everything, and if that's what you mean by panentheism, then because I can break it down etymologically, the N comes from the present active participle form of the verb to be in Latin, ens, esse, essentia, futurus sum. So I don't use that language.
I'll double check.
Thank you. Thank you.
So would that make it like pantheism allism and then panentheism like all beingism? Or how would that transliterate?
Yeah, so like pantheism is that everything is God. That's Spinoza. That's kind of what I think I said in a live stream last summer, that if you live in the country, your default religious intuition is going to be towards pantheism. And if you live in the city, it's going to be towards Gnosticism. And unless you take active corrective steps against it, that's probably where you're going to end up. And entheism would just say, well, no, it's just the being of God that's in everything. And it's like, oh, okay, do we need to have a word for that? Okay.
It's sneaky pantheism. They just like to make a distinction without a difference and use an abstract word to say, no, it's totally different, even though it's 0% different. Yeah. I think RJ's a little upset about that though, Father. So
yeah. I can't correct him if he says something errant. So, because what do I know, right? Like, I'm not Jewish, so.
I know. I just brought up panentheism because I heard that's like panentheism's like a Kabbalistic concept within Judaism.
Well, that's the esoteric knowledge, so I would be even less qualified to comment on that.
Yeah, I don't.
It's a Greek term. It's a Greek term. Well, it's like a Greek and Latin. Like, you're really mixing your roots up there. So I would be stunned if that was anywhere in Jewish mystical writings. Like, you should have some Hebrew word for that if you would like. I go talk to Jacob about it. He's your rabbi.
That's the occultists just fooling people who are easily fooled and want to believe stupid things. That's all that is. There's no tradition in Kabbalism.
Maybe Jacob.
Yeah, check with Jacob.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what we got going
on. You mentioned something about evangelicals in America. what
We may have an American evangelical on this stream. It's not
that's
impossible.
right. That's right.
But please
No,
continue.
I'm very curious. I mean, I have my understanding is they're quite um, prevalent more than Catholics. Is that the situation? I know America is
Yeah,
big.
there's a fascinating statistic floating around out there that 50% of church-going Christians in America attend 10% of the churches.
I see.
So they really pack them in, and like, you drive by these places, right? They're mostly built in the suburbs, and they look like shopping malls, and the interior of them, they look like movie theaters.
I see.
They're stages.
But
All right.
they've got seating for 2,000, 5,000 people. And they put on, I've never been to one, right? But I've seen the photos and like seen videos on YouTube, and they put on a big bombastic American show, which is what we're good at. Like a big bombastic show. We're not saying you can't do it in Australia, but we might have
not
invented it.
not
I'm
as
not
good,
sure.
not as good as America and
Nah.
Hollywood. No, nowhere near it.
We
No.
have one
Yeah.
skill. That's it.
And so the just looking from the
It's called
outside,
razzmatazz, yeah. The ultimate expression of capitalism, I suppose, in a religious form.
Maybe
Well, it's-
maybe if capitalism, which is still just a measure of freedom of trade or something, if it's unconstrained, if you have too much capitalism and you have unconstrained agents, people, unconstrained by religion, yeah, you get pretty wild, ridiculous, outrageous results, and that is the problem. So like, and this is where you run into the problem. We didn't have unconstrained anything when the Puritans were here, and they ran the country, and this country was locked down. Let me tell you, it was much better place, right? It's only as we expand and the Puritans actually lose control of the government that things start to go wonky.
And you can actually see, I sort of notice also, when we talk about Catholicism or Catholics, especially American Catholics, which majority of you are, the influence of Protestantism, the number of, for example, American history, not drinking, prohibition of drinking you had in the 1920s and 30s and whatever. Look at Italy, for example, or France, or Spain, or Eastern European countries, Slovenia and Poland. Drinking is much more controlled. There's not
that's
a
a Yankee
phobia about
thing.
it. Yeah,
No,
That's all a
it's the
Yankee thing
Puritan.
right there.
Puritan.
It's
Well,
the
Puritan sort of a cultural thing. That's what I'm trying to point out.
No, Puritans aren't cultural. They're actually fundamentalist. They're one of the fundamentalists. I mean, this is where the dual meaning of Christian comes in. If you're using the term Christian before the Reformation, it actually has a very clear meaning. If you're using the term Christian after the Reformation,
totally different.
You should
Absolutely.
probably use the term Gnostic, heretical, pagan cults, mostly around hippie Jesus, because that's what people seem to be referring to. So you need to discern that and Anglo-Catholicism. And then it's like, oh, now it all makes sense, because then it's like, oh, now I know what's going on. But this is the problem with the Puritans. They were very locked down, like very, very, because they couldn't rely on Christendom. They weren't Catholics. They didn't like the Catholics, and so they tried to wipe them out, basically, right out of the colonies. Get out, right? We're gonna fight you. We're gonna kill you.
What were they purifying?
Yeah,
they were purifying the Catholic influence out of the Church of England. Like that's their whole name.
That's
the problem is they don't have the sacrament of confession, and that's so beautiful about being Catholic.
Or Mary, right? Or symbolism, and they don't focus on the crucifixion, which I think is actually the primary error of the Orthodox. Is that no, you need to focus on the suffering, pal. That's what you need to focus on. The Catholics are like, yeah, right here, right around my neck, bro.
Another thing about Protestantism, I suppose, is gambling.
Yeah.
So drinking and gambling is. I'm not being a Catholic. I'm not encouraging it, of course, but the way they view it, the panic, and they
It's a
actually.
certain
Mm,
personality that can't tell the difference between penny poker and somebody gambling away their entire substance.
But it's handled differently in the U.S. So the North-South divide, which I did not understand until a handful of years ago when I read Colin Woodard's excellent book American Nations, because that, if you want to know anything about America, you read that book. That'll leave the
Yeah,
foundation.
I
You'll
can,
understand everything.
that was an
In-
excellent
you,
read.
you can vouch for it.
Instantly, a bunch of things make sense. What he talks about in there, although the end of the book is complete garbage and he goes nuts, but like the closer he gets to now, as all historians do, they get more and more insane. But what he talks about is the difference between public Protestantism and private Protestantism. And public Protestantism is in the north, and the public Protestants believe that to bring about the city of God on earth, why they would believe this, I have no idea. It doesn't matter. We need to make sure that people can't get themselves into trouble. And so when you live in New England, as I used to, they do not allow you to advertise strip clubs, alcohol stores, like any kind of alcohol is like really hard, or porn shops. Now, they look down upon the South. The South are a bunch of prudes. That's not true. Because you drive down south and they have billboards on the highway, porn shop 100 miles down the road. But to be fair, Jim, and I'm not joking because
Really? Oh
I
God!
can show it to you. They'll have a Jesus Saves billboard just before that, and then some other like seek the truth billboard with a number on it just after it. Like that's all over the place down here. It's very weird. And I was like, wait a minute, why are they advertising strip clubs, pawn shops, and liquor stores with billboards? Like you'd have to get off the highway and go out of your way to get anywhere near these things, right? But you're not allowed to do that in New England. Like it's actually illegal.
You got a lot of. Does New England have a lot of ambulance chasing lawyer billboards?
None, almost none. Oh,
Do they have any billboards? What's on them?
No, billboards themselves are kind of sacrilegious up north. We've gotten, they've got more now, but like not many more.
Is Salem in New England? I think it is Salem.
There's a Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah,
Massachusetts. That's right.
That's the witch trials and
the witch trial
was a major port for a long time.
See, David can fill us in Boston. Now, they have so many billboards now. But
10 years ago, even 10 years ago, they had half as many. Yeah, it was, and that was the difference. Like when you drove down to New York City, say back in the 90s or something, oh my goodness, there are billboards everywhere. But then the billboards down south are completely different.
Like what is on the northern billboards? Like what is advertised?
So there's a few lawyers, but they're not necessarily ambulance chaser lawyers. Right. Well, there was a guy who invented legal referral. And so he was an early billboarder. There's a few cars, right? The car dealerships, because they have a lot of money in New England because the high population density. It's really easy to sell cars. You can have 2 Honda dealerships a mile away, not a problem. You could never do that down here.
Man.
That would just not work in South Carolina. Maybe in Charleston, but I don't even think it would work there. But in Boston, that's no problem. I'm trying to think what else. So they would have a few billboards. There were no religious billboards that I remember. There might have been one somewhere. Not that there weren't any crosses, but there weren't many. Like you drive around down here, like you drive anywhere in the South, and you're going to see crosses just off the highway. You're going to see billboards with Jesus Saves. You're going to see billboards with the way, the truth, and the light. You're going to see pro-life billboards. You see all kinds of wacky. You're going to see billboards for barbecue and strip clubs. It's like Yeehaw! Long live the South. But up north, you just like you. They try to shut you down if you have a strip club up north, and you can't advertise it at all. Like some of the strip clubs, they can't even have signs on the road. Like you're gonna have to know where it is to get there because you ain't gonna see a sign for it. And it's just a very different vibe. But then again, New York is different because New York is Dutch, so they don't care. They're all about trade. So they always had billboards. They always had strip clubs and other seedy things. And this is why Boston and New York hate each other. That and the nouveau riche problem. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember the first time being kind of like, I think I was going off to seminary. It was the first time I ended up driving to seminary from Fargo, North Dakota to Detroit, Michigan, which means you have to drive through Illinois. Welcome to Illinois. That'll be $20, because of the toll roads, right? Just mind blowing to a 19-year-old me that you would have to pay to use a highway, and I just remembered being kind of shocked by the number of gentlemen's clubs and hourly rate hotel rooms being advertised around Chicago there. Because we don't really have that. Like, obviously we have them, but like we don't have the billboards for them all that much in, let's say, Lutheran territories in the Midwest. They got a little bit of that Yankee influence in them, where the Norwegian Lutherans all basically became Yankees, right? But the German Lutherans, they'd be a little bit more Midlander in their, which is still kind of like, I don't know if we should be advertising that. So all of
that's
the
my
billboards,
question.
yeah.
Father Eric, if somebody put a gun to your head and made you in charge of your state's billboard advertisements, like what would your policy be?
I think I'd keep it as it is. It's fine.
Okay.
We've got the Jesus billboards and we don't have the strip clubs. What am I to be upset about?
Yeah. I would be there for Jesus billboards, but not strip club billboards. That sounds like a good billboard situation.
The Midwest is completely different. I mean, like the South made and ran alcohol throughout the nation for a reason. Like,
especially in Arkansas, right? And Tennessee and Kentucky, North Carolina, the mountainous parts, West Virginia.
The Appalachian Mountains, I suppose.
Appalachian,
Appalachian Mountains there.
That should be its own state. That should be its own state.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to go there.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Every time I hear someone say that it's geographically a part of the same range as the Scottish mountains, it makes me go, I wonder about that.
It is. Like I've been to that part, not the big part of the range, but like the foothills in Inverness. And I was looking at those mountains and I'm like, oh yeah. And then if you've been to Scotland, like Edinburgh, and then you go to and Inverness too, because boy, Inverness is gorgeous. And then you go to North Carolina, right up the street from me, about 3 hours from here. You're going to be like, and I'm where again? I'm very confused. Well, that's why the Scots-Irish settled there. I mean, they said it. They said, like, this is just like home. It really is just like their home. That mountain, and the further south you are, the more like the lowlands it is, and the further north you are, the more like the Scottish Highlands it is. It's by weather.
I've had some recent experiences that being in the new world, it feels like somebody grabbed a bunch of the old world, stuck it in a blender, didn't blend it completely, but it's chopped up. And now everything's piled on top of each other in weird ways.
We just have all the filler here.
I was in a neighborhood around a mosque in Texas talking to people, and he's just like, "Oh, I am in Kuwait." Like they got their materials at Home Depot and they poured their concrete, and I recognize this architecture and the things that things are made out of, but then I'm really in Kuwait and I'm here in Texas, and it's just these 4 streets, and I don't know. It's just, it's a weird feeling.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. 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 It's
it's sitting stacked on top of a bunch of other different things, and I can just walk into that world and then walk out of that world.
Yep.
And but like talking to people, like it's really actually great, and I wasn't expecting that. And just like the way things are chopped into little pieces, but then they're still self-existent. It is quite striking.
But we perfected that when we built the country, right? So like you know, I mean, you have to understand things like Roger Williams goes to the to the Plymouth colonies basically, and they're like, bro, like we're like religious tolerant and all that, but you gotta go. Like you just have to go. And then they give him some land, and he founds the state of Rhode Island. And we shouldn't have given up that land. Massachusetts should take all that land back. Maybe chop the middle of Connecticut off and just sink it or something, because and then there's got to be something we can do about Connecticut. We can't keep it, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, Rhode Island, some of the parts of Rhode Island are just gorgeous, and yeah, that's all Roger Williams, but he wouldn't stop preaching. So they were like, and I think that's part of the problem in the US is we run out of space at some layer. I mean, not really, right? We have plenty of
not geographically,
but we've run out of, we'll say, space that people want to live in, right? That is desirable. And now people are bumping up against each other.
No, you haven't.
It's a new problem.
Donald Trump said he'd taking Canada.
Yeah. Listen, my friend. He wants Alberta, right? And like, Alberta is even worse than North Dakota, and I can barely live here in North Dakota.
Yeah, but
if they send us all their cold air after they've warmed it up for us. So I just
yeah, but at least if we had Alberta, we could keep it as a state because we don't mind them voting in our elections. The rest of Canada, no one in the United States wants anybody from the rest of Canada voting in any of their elections. So they would be up for territory status where they couldn't vote, but no way in hell we're making them a state. Nah, that's not happening. Not happening.
We could get all that Albertan oil too.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the minerals, but they're all conservatives, right? And they're all pissed off because they're supporting the rest of the country. And they're like, yeah, enough of this, because the rest of the country is just harassing them at this point.
From the Australian perspective, looking at America, I think it's very divided in terms of economics, politics, religion. And there's a thing, I mean, this is what they say here: flyover states. For example, you've got California, and then you got the East Coast, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and all those, and and these are the financial, the economic motor of America, one would say, and all the states in between, the Midwest, as I understand,
but
ignored or not. Frowned upon, looked at, not as good
by the leftists, yes, because leftists are bad people, like just all around. That's the problem, right? But that's the problem. Also, like there are real reasons for that, which is the population density on the coast is a lot higher than you can imagine, and the Midwest grows all the food to enable those people to exist, and they're ungrateful, and that just more evidence of bad people, right? Like, sorry, but that is what it is.
The biggest and easiest way to track a election is to just track rural counties versus urban counties. And it's like you have
big divide. Yeah.
It's a big divide, and it's like, okay, why do we have that divide? It's like the way of life and the people you're surrounding yourself with is just going to have a really big impact on what you think of the president of the United States, right? You go out to the rural counties, right? You just go drive down the highway. These farmers, they got the big Trump signs, It's like, all right, it's
the whole side of a barn.
Whole side of a barn. Vote Trump, like,
right. Well, and also but there's also the sort of peer pressure factor, right? If you're in a city, you rely to some extent on not pissing off your neighbors, even though you don't know them, right? In the Midwest, you rely on your neighbors. In the city, you rely on not pissing off your neighbors. And so you're less likely to signal if you're more a keep it to yourself person. But then the signals you get flooded with are typically these, signals about, oh, I'm voting Democrat. I know you're voting Democrat, because that's how they talk, by the way. It really is. It's really annoying. So glad I moved out of the Northeast. They don't do that in the South. Even though they vote that way, they don't do that in the South, in the cities. It's very different cities. I mean, they still vote poorly, but not in as large a margin, because politeness is a bigger deal in the South than it is in the North. And so what you end up with is, yeah, of course they vote that way. Yeah, U.S. elections are Gnostics versus pantheists. Can confirm. So although they vote that way, that's not necessarily the way they feel about it, because they're just doing the go along to get along thing in the city. Whereas in the country, people don't go along to get along, because they're very independent, even though they rely on their neighbors more. It's a weird way of understanding the world. And it just so happens that there are fewer cities in the middle of the country, where they're growing all the food to feed the world. Weird, huh? I know. I don't know why.
Really a shame that Fargo was built where it is, because this is some of the best farmland in the world, and it shouldn't be wasted on these sprawling housing developments. Like, we should pick the whole thing up and move it 20 miles, 40 miles west. That would be best for everyone.
There's a similar thing in North Texas where the Blackland Prairie is really quite fertile, and there is the agricultural industry has really, really shrunk, and it's all just housing and roads and that kind of infrastructure, like disconnected from agriculture.
I mean, you can grow killer tomatoes here, so like that's pretty cool. Not literal killer tomatoes; they're just big.
You can grow literal killer tomatoes here in Texas.
Yeah, in Texas, anything.
Everything's bigger in Texas,
Everything.
Well, no, it's just like the yellow wild tomatoes that are poisonous if you eat them. Don't eat them. But we can also grow normal non-killer tomatoes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it really does depend on where you draw the lines, what kind of divide you see, and whether or not you understand it. Because as with all information, yeah, the minute you cut up the election in terms of population density, you see exactly what's going on, right? And if you don't do that, you don't see it correctly.
One of my mates just recently returned from America, and he played a joke on me. He says, he's been all over Canada, America, I think Alaska, done the whole bit. And then he says, but look, I said, how was it? He showed me various pictures, and so I said, blah, blah, all right. And then he said, but there's one place you got to go. I said, what? Where? And he played a trick. He said, you got to go to LA and Compton. It's a must. It's a must. So I said, yeah, all right. I didn't know that. So, after a while, I didn't realize it was a dangerous sort of area to go to.
Yeah.
And then I said, you smarty pants. But anyway,
after that, you can go to the south side of Chicago, and then you can go to East St. Louis. Then you can go to the east side of Detroit.
Philadelphia.
And you can go to Baltimore, Philadelphia, anywhere in Philadelphia.
Anywhere in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But you impressed me. It's a must-go place. You got to go there absolutely if you ever go on your itinerary. I said, all right.
Well, you will certainly see things there that you probably won't see just about anywhere else in the world.
That's true. Well, for as long as you have sight, this may not be much longer than your visit, but whatever.
Well, see, I did 4 years of seminary in Detroit, and I kind of developed a bit of a soft spot for the soft spots of the city. There were also places that were just like, oh, this is awful. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But it was a little more patchwork than you might think. It wasn't uniformly gang. Like, there was hardly anybody left. Like,
it wasn't Philadelphia.
It wasn't Philadelphia. Yeah. Well, we can all. I hate the Eagles, man. I really hate the Eagles. Yeah. So anyway, Detroit actually had a few charming spots to it. So Detroit, I'm not going to say it's a must-see, but there's some cool stuff there. Just be careful where you go.
Yeah.
Not every neighborhood's worth it.
The extent of my knowledge of Detroit is two things. From history, it used to be a car producing center many years ago, Ford and all that. The second is that I don't know whether you know that show. There was a show of 8 Mile, and it was a popular American show.
Yeah.
Secondhand people walk in and a pawn shop. That's what it was, pawn shop, I think. And they pawned various items, but so I know about 8 miles. Apparently, it's a
Yeah, 8
road.
Mile Road. Well, that's what
Road,
they
yeah.
do is they measure up from
Yeah,
downtown. Every
that's
mile they
my
name. You got like 13-mile road, you got 17-mile road, but 8 Mile Road is the city
yeah.
limits of Detroit itself. So
I see.
anything south
Oh.
of 8 Mile, you're in D town there. I also think that Detroit style pizza is criminally underrated, but
What is Detroit style?
see, that's the thing. Nobody even knows about it. Let's
Criminal.
see if the
Investment.
Google here can help us out.
Mm.
Yeah, everyone's got their different little pizza styles, oddly enough. But
Well, this one I think is actually unique enough that it really does like need its own name. All righty,
I
Google.
believe it.
Try not sucking today.
I mean, we've got, Chicago deep dish, which is definitely unique, but right. And you got that
Well, that's such a
Italian
small
thin
image.
crust, and you gotta be able to find a good
Sorry,
image.
my computers are being a potato right now. I'm going to find you guys. It's going to be so much easier for me to just show you a picture of it than to try and explain it.
That's a good
So
idea.
this
Bob.
right here, gentlemen, share screen, Detroit style pizza. Here we go. Come on, computer, you can do it. So it's
Look up
square.
hands.
Square.
It's
Oh, the
Oh, that's
square.
what that means. But what about this makes it better though?
They do that. Like I actually really enjoy the crust on it, which, as you know, is a
Oh.
considerable portion of the pizza. And I think what they must be doing is they must be putting like oil on the bottom of like a cast iron pan. And so
Mhm.
as it's
Mm.
rising, it's also getting like really crispy and it gets really oily and crispy around the edges. And then there isn't always a strict, sauce, cheese, toppings. Sometimes it's all just kind of thrown on there in a little bit more of a chaotic manner. So anyway, Detroit style pizza, criminally underrated. But if you do go to Detroit, then go to Buddy's Pizza in Detroit. You can also go to the ones
Bit of a
that
plug,
are,
eh?
yeah.
I
You
like
can
that.
also go to the ones that are in like Livonia or whatever. And those are okay, or Dearborn. But you can go to the original Buddies in Detroit proper, and the great thing about it is that they've got 24-hour security in the parking lot. So the odds of your car getting broken into are very low.
Well, that's good. That's very good.
And here is a fact that we all should celebrate is he can get good Detroit style pizza and sale. So anyway,
Good Detroit. Mm. Well, I would love to go to Michigan someday. I've never been.
Me too. I would like to. Well, I would like to also visit in the Midwest. Would be an interesting place to visit. I don't know what was. Been raised in sort of a southeastern bubble, so I don't quite know what other parts of the world are like.
yeah,
Mm.
well, hopefully you have an opportunity to travel around. It's always it's always interesting. It's always interesting for me to meet people who have like only lived in one place because I grew up in a military family, so it's like
Mm.
not only did I move everywhere, but like I was raised among people from everywhere who moved everywhere.
Yeah.
So like gosh, we lived in Norway for 2 years, and we went to this English speaking school there. And it's like I had classmates from England because their dads worked for British Petroleum, and I had classmates from Dubai because they like worked with Arab oil companies because that part of Norway had a lot of offshore drilling. You had lots of oil executives moving there. Then there was a bunch of military kids, and so the military kids are just kind of from all over the United States. So I just kind of don't appreciate sometimes the formation that I got with just encountering lots of different types of people. So anyway, you'll have an opportunity. America is a great place for road trips. You've got, Bucky's and Quick Trips and whatever other things all over the place.
Well,
So
the famous road is Route 66, isn't it?
that's in the Southwest, so it's a very long ways away from me.
Immortalized in various songs. I'm talking about 70s and 80s.
It's still worth driving.
Yeah, it's mostly dead, but still, it's still worth it. But like all the stuff that was there as part of the beginning of the motorized era or error, as the case may be, a lot of that's gone, and so it is now a more nostalgic sort
rather
of road.
than real. I see.
Yeah. I have a somewhat tangential question related to this for Father Eric, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'm curious. Do you know who the communitarian theorist and philosopher Patrick Deneen is?
Patrick Deanan.
Patrick
He's
Deneen.
he's Patrick Dean. No, I'm not familiar
Deneen.
with
Deneen.
he's a contemporary one, right?
Yeah, Catholic. So Patrick Deneen, it's Deneen.
He wrote
He's a
Democracy, the God That Failed, right?
I think that was somebody else, but he wrote why liberalism failed. But I
Oh,
bring
Why
him up
Liberalism Failed.
because
Okay.
one of the things he analyzes is how after like in the modern era, especially like after the 2000s, but like you can trace it before, the idea of like a local community you're like attached to has sort of dissolved due to interconnectedness, like globalization and everything, and how like he as a communitarian Catholic philosopher he advocates for a return to like more localist ways of being and like yeah, but I don't know how he's sort of seen in the broader Catholic world.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of stays in his lane. I think I know who you're talking about now. And the thing is that the Catholic Church has never like fully reconciled itself to the invention of the automobile. What I mean by that is your so in
I
canon
like
law,
that.
in canon law, the person that is your proper pastor and your proper bishop is in 98% of cases determined entirely by where you live. So your domicile or your quasi domicile, depending on which one's applicable, that determines what parish you belong to and what diocese you belong to. And the thing is that it's been breaking down for a while because of the automobile and the unfortunate variety that we sometimes find in Catholic parishes means that people are willing to drive a rather long ways to get something that isn't slop, to say the least. So it's it's complicated. So there's been, like in our diocese. So the way the universal law is written imagines that you go to your territorial parish and you interact with your pastor, who's the pastor of that parish primarily. In other forms of English, the same term is called parish priest. So just in case that might be the Australian usage there for Australian
Absolutely, parish
viewers.
priest. That's
Yeah,
right.
we say pastor in the United States for the guy who's in charge.
Do you?
That's too Protestant for me.
Yeah,
You don't say rector?
no.
Okay.
I mean, look, if we all just spoke Latin, then we would just say parochus and the vicar parochialis, and that'd be really clear. But we don't speak Latin, so that just makes things a little more muddled there. Yeah, so that's the way the universal law is written. But I guarantee you, every diocese in the United States makes adjustments for the fact that people have cars and are going to drive to the parish that they want to go to. Sometimes really not that far even. Like they might just be unaware that, you know, they live on just the wrong streets to be a part of this parish's territory, and they don't even know that they're not belong to their territorial parish. So all of that to say that church registration, where you sign up to receive mailings and get put on the rolls, which was a Protestant invention, we mostly have adopted that as just sort of a bureaucratic convenience. You can get registered at the parish, and then we can send you the envelopes so that you can file your taxes, and get a receipt for the IRS for the
I
tithing that
see.
you've been doing at the parish. So it's just a bureaucratic convenience. Parish registration is for us, which means that the Catholic Church is still fundamentally a communitarian thing. And when Patrick Deanan promotes these things, he's just thinking along with the mind of the church. But we're dealing with what we have right now, and we're trying to deal with this.
Yeah, I actually saw an interview with him on the I think is that Bishop Robert Barron's channel, or is it Word on Fire? Is Word on Fire where Bishop Robert Barron is from?
So that is the organization that he founded to continue and assist his work and his influence. I think it would be a. I wonder if it's actually got canonical erection. I mean, he's a bishop, so he can just do it himself, right? He doesn't need to ask anybody. But wonder if it is actually a public association of the Christian faithful. It should be. Anyway, yeah, that's Bishop Barron's project.
Yeah, I think I saw on Word on Fire Institute, which I think is like that's a YouTube channel for, you said Bishop Robert Barron founded it. I forgot if it's named Word on Fire, Word on Fire Institute. It doesn't matter, but I saw something with Patrick Denis on it.
Mhm.
You might be interested in him if you're interested in like contemporary Catholic teaching, social teaching.
Yeah, he gets mentioned a lot in like. So I have a subscription to First Things, which is a very highbrow magazine. You know, you have that sitting on your coffee table. It lets people know that you read books and probably have opinions about architecture and contemporary authors. Good opinions on architecture.
I
Like,
That's even worse.
just on that point which you just mentioned, you're talking about local parishes. I think you Americans are to blame. And here I go. The motor vehicle. I think it's the ultimate expression, if I can religiously put it, of Protestant individualism.
Yeah.
I'm in my car and I'm the boss.
Yeah, Peterson
And
says that.
and if
Yeah.
I can make a comparison with a recent book about Middle Ages and the controversy about this, everybody calls it the Dark Ages, from say around 7th, 8th century right up to the Reformation, and he calls it. And the reason a lot of he sort of criticizes it for being Dark Ages because it was stable ages. What he was saying, or his thesis of the book, was this: you were born in a parish, you married someone around 2 or 3 villages. The church was your intellectual gathering, your existential place of worship. You toiled the land. Your local monastery was your pharmacy and your hospital. And the only thing, and you probably lived and died not more
Mhm.
away from the sound of the church bell, which is 10, 15 kilometers,
Yeah.
or put it in miles, all your life for generations. And that is the beautiful things which we called community, parochial and parish, your extended family. And it was, but a lot of, from our perspective, modern perspective, it says, oh, Lord, they were, stupid, monotonous, blah, 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 blah. But it's actually, the thesis is so interesting. He puts that it was the blessed age of pan-Catholicism of Europe. And I like that expression. And
Well,
this,
it
and I've
was
got the book.
Christendom for sure. I mean, that was the
mm.
I mean, what describing it as stable? Yeah, that was history all the way up until the
Everybody
Protestant
talks about
Reformation.
the Dark Ages. You know what I'm saying?
No, but no. You have to call it the Dark Ages because it was actually dark. There were a bunch of plagues, and death became a big theme.
Now let's get a little bit more specificity here. There was definitely a big old collapse after the Roman Empire and the West fell. So I'm willing to say we've got a few hundred years of relative darkness, certainly between the bright light of Roman civilization and then the bright light of we'll say the High Middle Ages. When we get to the 13th century.
But the Enlightenment makes no sense and cannot be made any sense of unless you had a Dark Ages, because the Enlightenment is the rediscovery of the books of the Greeks and Romans, effectively. A little bit more than that, right? But the collapse of technology is a big deal, right? It's like a really big deal to understand this, actually, because you hear some of these people like Dr. Vervaeke talk about we can't go back. Oh no, buddy, we can go back. Look at the Dark Ages. That's exactly what happened, right? I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but the thing is, you get to choose how you go back, right? If you don't, it's going to be really bad, right? So this we can't go back nonsense that everybody spews. No. If you say that, it's going to be way worse than anything you think the Dark Ages was in your chronological snobbery, right? It's going to be way worse because you're gonna be forced back by a collapse. So we should be carefully backing out and going back. Maybe getting rid of the automobile is not a bad idea, right? Honestly, right? Certainly, we've got to do something about the internet. Maybe we don't have to get rid of it, but we'd have to restrict its use for sure.
Nobody should have a smartphone until they're 25.
Nobody should have a smartphone ever. How's that?
Well, I'm all on board. You guys know.
You
Get one of these little bad boys here.
You're a bit late. I'm the only one who has never had a phone ever.
Ooh.
Ever.
Nobility.
Gentlemen.
You can get away with that in Australia.
That's my phone. All of my 4 kids have it, and wife and all that, but I refuse to have people either drop off the chair, they say this guy's crazy, or they can't believe, they start laughing.
Why don't you want a constant distraction device that takes your attention away from everything important all the time?
Well, I can show some books why I don't, but anyway. I mean, the 3 books I always say to answer your question in terms of literature is Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451, and George Orwell, Animal Farm, and 1984.
Yeah.
And
you mean those word instruction manuals?
No, well, they are. Well, they're becoming. They're now. They used to be fiction. They used to be fiction. I think the more they should be reclassified as non-fiction. That's my thing. That's my answer to your question.
Yeah, but that's actually why it's important to think of the Dark Ages as dark. I mean, it wasn't the loss of technology through the loss of knowledge. It was a loss of technology through the loss of need. You don't need concrete aqueducts in a medieval city. They serve no purpose. Like it's too much water delivery for too few people, right? And so it's not that we lost that per se, right? Although we did lose the formula for concrete for thousands of years. So there was loss.
That's
right. Yeah. And we've lost complex gearing like 3 times. Right? Like now we know, the ancient Greeks did have trigonometry and we lost that. Like there have been losses.
Talk in terms of the greatest catastrophe ever. It wasn't 9/11. It was the burning of the library at Alexandria, and all our classic books
maybe
were burned. You know how many? There's only about 2,000, and you know who carried that civilization? The Catholic Church, the scribes in the monastery. Where they before the invention of the printing press, there was Trappist monks and various things. And thanks to the Catholic Church, people don't realize there were hundreds of people at the table with a not a torch but a candle, transcribing, Greek and mostly into Latin, Greek and Aramaic, various other languages. But thanks to that, in terms like astronomy, for example, medicine, theology, the first universities, 9th, 10th century, there was only 4 subjects: mathematics, astronomy, theology, and philosophy.
What more does a
Yeah.
man need? We needed to keep the doctors out of the universities.
True.
The physicians,
But-
I mean,
but-
the physicians.
Yeah. But these days, as I say, if I had it all over, I should have been a good bricklayer or a good electrician. I would have probably wouldn't have the headache of this new world. Would be, yeah. I'm arguing for ignorance is a bliss. That's all I'm
Yes.
arguing.
Yes.
Bricklayer, you need to have a strong back if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I'll be
for
gone.
more than
Forget
30
it.
years.
I,
Friend of
Also,
mine's
I
a
wouldn't say
bricklayer. He's got a certain gait to him. He's been doing it for a while, and he's kind of beat up by it.
yeah.
But he always has work because there's so few bricklayers around that
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
so he's doing all right, but he's a little beat up. So
I wonder if it's possible to be a bricklayer without being beat up physically. I wonder if there's a way of approaching it and still being productive.
You're still productive. Like, look, I mean, the Catholics wear what they wear around their neck for a reason. Everybody doesn't want the cost, but if you want a cathedral, you've got a cost.
now the thing about the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, is it was rather cut off from the West during
1054. Yeah.
the Dark Ages, early Middle Ages on. And honestly, I did some study to this in my history of canon law class, just kind of tracking the papacy and like the controversies over the papacy as they manifested in canonical sources. And like as soon as the Edict of Milan went out, East and West started arguing about the prerogatives
That's
of the
right.
Roman pontiff, right? And there were some East-West schisms that predated the Great Schism, even in like the 5th and 6th centuries, where they were able to patch things back up. They were able to come to an agreement there. But I think the way the Byzantine Empire fits in with understanding of what Europe was going through in that age, you really got to look at especially the coronation of Charlemagne as the Holy Roman Emperor, as that actually being one of the major precipitating causes of the Great Schism, because a lot of Orthodox Christians have a place in their mind for the emperor that Catholics reserve for the Pope, and they're not entirely without reason for it. So, like, they look at the Council of Nicaea. Why were they in Nicaea? What's Nicaea? That's not a major town, but that's where Constantine's summer villa was, and Constantinople hadn't been built yet. So
Present-day Turkey. Yes, that's
yeah.
right.
So they met in Nicaea because Constantine wanted the Christians to get their stuff together on a few issues, especially the dating of Easter, which was a major controversy in those days. So the Orthodox, after the split, they say, look, the emperor has always been a Christian emperor. Like ever since he became a Christian emperor, he's always had a certain role to play in the church, and we're just acknowledging that and keeping that tradition alive. Whereas the Romans say, well, the Council of Nicaea gets ranked as an ecumenical council because it had papal approbation as such. And the legates of the Roman pontiff were there, even though the Roman pontiff himself wasn't. And the formula of Nicaea was accepted by the Pope. And that's kind of that's the rub right there. That's what we're dealing with. Is and I guess points in favor of the Catholics is we still have a Pope Do you guys have an
Yeah,
emperor? Is it Vladimir
you'd-
Putin? You know,
yeah.
Right.
Well, the Nicene, it only lasted for 2 months, as you know, in 325 AD.
Mhm.
And
happy
Nicene,
1700th anniversary, everybody.
Mm.
and it is the present city of Iznik, Iznik in Turkey. That's Nicaea. But basically, the controversy, as I understand, I could be wrong, is between the Arians and the Alexandrians. And it's all about whether the deity of Christ, I should say. And that was the theological argument.
But yeah, but
that
I
worked out.
think so. So the Aryan question was definitely hotly debated there.
Argued, yeah,
But
correct.
I
Yeah.
think what more people would have noticed was a uniform dating for the celebration of Easter,
Hmm.
right? Just like you go to the Second Vatican Council, they would have had hot debates over Dignitatis Humanae and church-state relations. But what everybody noticed was parts of the mass were now being said in the vernacular. I mean, immediately, right? Like by 1964, 65, that was being implemented. So, but we don't worry about the dating of Easter very much anymore because, at least in the West, we've got the Gregorian calendar. It's the most accurate solar calendar that's ever been invented. They were able to calculate the date of Easter through the year 3000 without the use of decimal points. So that's pretty cool.
You mentioned
Looks
you mentioned Second Vatican Council. I can't let you go without mentioning Nostra Aetate, and I think I just can't get over that declaration in '65, and basically what it sort of emanates from that. Putting in a nutshell, you probably know Nostra Father. I'm sure you're aware of that. I think that's the pinnacle of the argument from 62 to 65 of Second Vatican Council. Basically, and it's espoused by our current Pope, who's in hospital, as we all know, that all religions or non-Christian religions are equal, and there are many religions, and the
well, I've read Nostra
argue.
Aetate, and
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
I really don't
Yeah.
recall it saying that. I
Well,
recall it trying to this is my take on the document. I
yeah, go on.
recall it trying to say as many nice things as they could about the various religions in the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, yeah.
But if you take Nostra Aetate along with the much more important document, Lumen Gentium, which talks about the Catholic Church as the new Israel. I think that's the context in which you need to read that. And this is the context in which I'm speaking, is that it's dark outside. And even though we've
It's
engaged
day
with,
out here. It's day out here in Sydney.
I know you're
1:30.
just getting going, Jim, but at least for me, the rational thing to do is to go to bed even after the
Yeah.
silliness of adjusting the clocks. So
So-
we're going to leave it at that.
Okay. Nice
Thank
talking
you.
to you.
Good night, and God bless you all.
Good point.